A single empire in Europe would take over a quarter of the planet's land and population. The foundations began on the lands of England, with a powerful British monarchy igniting an extraordinary story of exploration and world domination. The British Empire saw the greatest stories of human achievement and triumph, but also saw the worst sides of humanity. After the discovery of America around 500 years ago, they ventured out into the oceans. The British would encounter unknown civilizations, creating historic partnerships and rivalries. Within 4 centuries, the empire would be worth over $600 billion. But how did an empire that owned parts of the Americas, Asia, Africa, and even Australia eventually come to an end? We must start from the beginning. Long before the knowledge of far-flung places, a man by the name of King Alfred the Great had to defend his small Anglo-Saxon kingdom from the invading Danish Vikings. In 878 AD, the Vikings under Guthrum launched a massive invasion, and Alfred was forced to retreat to the marshlands of Somerset, where he sought refuge on the Isle of Athelney. Alfred used this time to regroup and gather loyal followers. He formed a strong army, and in a decisive battle at Edington, he defeated the Viking leader Guthrum. The victory forced Guthrum to sign the Treaty of Wedmore, which established the Dane Law, a region of England where Viking rule was officially recognized, but also secured peace between the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons. He then began the process of unifying all of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom, which his grandson Athelstan would finish. In 924, when Athelstan ascended to the throne of Wessex, his rule faced opposition and challenges from rival claimants, particularly from the Viking-controlled areas of Northumbria and Mercia. Despite these obstacles, Athelstan proved to be a capable and determined leader. In 927 AD, Athelstan managed to conquer Northumbria and effectively unite England under his rule, which led Athelstan to be the first king of England. 200 years later, that battleground would be set when English King Henry II wanted to expand his kingdom to Ireland. In the spring of 1171, King Henry II, accompanied by a retinue of knights and soldiers, sailed from England to Waterford, Ireland. Upon his arrival, he quickly set about asserting his authority, demanding the submission of various Irish kings and chieftains to his rule. Henry was determined to establish English control over Ireland, and firmly believed that the Irish kings should acknowledge his sovereignty. As news of King Henry's arrival spread across the island, reactions among the Irish leaders were mixed. However, when various Irish bishops and clergymen met at the Synod of Cashel in 1171, these religious leaders recognized Henry II as the sovereign ruler of Ireland, acknowledging his authority to rule the island, making Ireland the first colony of England, long before anyone knew they would be a global empire. Another 100 years later, in 1277, King Edward I of England wanted to bring Wales under his control and incorporate it into his kingdom. His desire to conquer Wales was driven by strategic, political, and territorial motivations. The journey towards the conquest of Wales began with the First Welsh War in 1277. Edward I launched a determined invasion into Gwynedd, the heartland of Welsh resistance in North Wales. His forces clashed with the Welsh defenders. Though fierce and relentless, the Welsh were eventually defeated, and their ruler, Prince Llewellyn, was compelled to submit to Edward's authority. Having established his dominance in Gwynedd, Edward I set out to solidify his control over Wales. He understood that military might alone not be enough to subdue the Welsh spirit of resistance, so he devised a multi-pronged strategy. One of the critical components of his plan was to construct a network of imposing fortresses across Wales to maintain English dominance and keep the Welsh in check. Despite the initial show of force, Welsh resistance persisted, and in 1282, a second conflict erupted known as the Second Welsh War. The war was fierce and hard-fought, but fate was not on the side of the Welsh. With the Welsh resistance largely quelled, Edward I swiftly solidified his conquest, making Wales part of the English kingdom. England's war struggles aren't done yet. From 1337 to 1453, the 100-Year War began with England and France. The everlasting conflict weakened both empires and kept England tied to their tiny island. Right after the 100 Years' War, England was amid another war. This time, it was between the House of Lancaster and the House of York, in the infamous War of the Roses from 1455 to 1487. The Lancastrians won, and King Henry VI was declared king. The rest of the world was starting to open up. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and landed in the Bahamas. After his initial landing, Columbus explored several other islands in the Caribbean, including Cuba and Hispaniola, now shared between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. He also explored the coasts of present-day Central and South America, including Venezuela and Panama. This discovery of a massive landmass led the British government to desire land on this new continent. When Italian Giovanni Caboto sought support from King Henry VII to explore this new continent and find a direct route to Asia, King Henry was intrigued and granted Caboto a patent, which authorized him to explore and claim any lands he might discover for the English crown. Giovanni changed his name to John Cabot, and he was ready to go. In May 1497, Cabot set sail from Bristol, England, in hopes to find a passageway to Asia. He led a crew of about 18 men aboard a small ship called the Matthew. Their journey across the Atlantic was challenging, as they faced treacherous weather conditions and unknown dangers. After several weeks at sea, on June 24, 1497, Cabot and his crew finally spotted land. They had arrived somewhere along the eastern coast of North America, in an area later named Newfoundland, as it was newfound land. Cabot and his crew were greeted by an unfamiliar landscape and encountered indigenous peoples, likely the Beothuk or Mi'kmaq, who had lived in the region for thousands of years. Cabot claimed the land for England, planting the English flag on the shore and taking possession of the newly discovered territory. The exact duration of Cabot's stay in the New World is uncertain, but it is believed that he explored the coastline briefly before returning to England, arriving back in Bristol in August 1497, where he was celebrated as a hero for his achievements. Cabot's discovery spread quickly throughout Europe, generating great excitement and interest. His successful voyage provided the English with hope of finding a western route to Asia and competing with other European powers in the lucrative trade markets of the East. Encouraged by his success, Cabot made a second voyage in 1498, possibly intending to explore further and solidify England's claim to the newfound lands. However, the details of this expedition are lost to history. Some reports suggest that the voyage was successful, while others claim it ended in disaster, with Cabot and his crew lost at sea. While back in England, King Henry VIII was married to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. During their beginning years of marriage, everything was going fine. Like any king at the time, he was forced to be loyal to the Catholic Church and yearned for a strong and legitimate heir to secure his dynasty. However, Henry's heart grew heavy with a troubling dilemma as the years passed. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon had only yielded a single surviving child, Princess Mary. The king's desperate desire for a male heir began to consume him, and he became increasingly convinced that his marriage was invalid in the eyes of God. Turning to the Pope for a solution, Henry beseeched the Holy See to grant him an annulment of his marriage to Catherine. He argued that the marriage was unlawful, for Karen had previously been married to his older brother Arthur, who had passed away. According to the Old Testament, marrying one's brother's widow was strictly forbidden, and Henry believed this was why he lacked a male heir. However, fate had other plans. The Pope, influenced by Catherine's powerful nephew, Emperor Charles V of Spain, refused to grant the annulment. Frustration and desperation gripped the king's heart, and he made a momentous decision. In a bold and unprecedented move, Henry VIII decided to break away from the Roman Catholic Church and establish his own church within England. So, in 1534, the English Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy, formally severing England's ties to the papacy and officially creating the Church of England, with King Henry VIII to be its spiritual leader, and Anglicanism was born.